Welcome to episode 5 of the Future Champions Golf podcast. We are very excited to have Brandi Jackson from Brandi Jackson Golf on today. Of course, we have Connor as always, and Brandi's a college golf recruiting expert. She's a former LPGA Tour player and has a lot of awesome stuff going on in the game of golf, and we look forward to talking to you. So welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat with y'all and share what's going on and see if I can answer some questions and just do what I do most days.
Yeah. So how did you get started on this journey with Brandi Jackson Golf?
So I had played professionally for about 8 years and actually had a pretty good year of LPGA status back in 2009. I was just on the bubble of having full status and made most of the cuts that year, but never really finished quite high enough to really do enough. And I finished, I think, 126 on the money list and, 125 gets you at least some status for the next year. But I was feeling pretty good and had no plans to not be playing anymore. I mean, like I said, that was my 8th season maybe. Went back to Q school that year and then just didn't play great and had come across one of the larger recruiting companies out there that were looking for people in smaller sports to do things while they were still traveling and actively playing and doing these talks about recruiting. And, I had no idea it had become a business and that there was so much need for all of this. And so I just kind of reached out, not really thinking much about it. Before I knew it, I was on my way to Chicago to learn how to do public speaking, which was everything that I hated. I was nothing about who I was at that time. It's what hurt me through my golf career. I was horrible with that kind of stuff. I was very much an introvert, very much like, just did not handle that kind of stuff well. Interviews, talking, speaking, meeting people. That stuff was just not something I did very well at all. So I'm on a plane to go kind of learn about all that and start working with them. And the plan was to do it and still keep playing. And as the year went on, I was back on the Futures Tour, Semester Tour, and I'd have these events to do for them. And I just started kind of gravitating more towards doing that and kind of got an interest in it. And before I knew it, I just wasn't playing anymore and had, kind of lost the really, I guess in a way, kind of lost the passion for it and just started developing it for this and then worked with them for about a year and a half and then started my own business doing it. It's been almost 12 years now. So it's 2011, I guess it was, that started Brandi Jackson Golf as a way to be a little more hands-on with things, more involved, make bigger connections, better connections with the college coaches, just to be able to do my own thing with it. And so worked with the boys and the girls for 4 or 5 years initially. And for the last 5-ish years of it probably has been just strictly on the girls. And that's been great to just be able to focus on the girl side of things and get to know the women's coaches in that world and the girls and the ups and downs of all that. So that's kind of how it got me to this point now.
That's a really cool journey. I actually was curious. My mom is a big believer in like the see a need, fill a need type deal, which is kind of why Chris and I kind of started, like this podcast, is because we didn't feel like there was enough like informational material available to players. Did you see a need when it came to helping young athletes on their college recruiting journey for golf?
I did. I didn't really 100% buy into it initially when I worked for the recruiting company I worked for. It kind of did feel maybe a little transactional. It wasn't very hands-on. It wasn't very involved. And you could still see the need, but you also saw that a lot of coaches just, they really had their trusted resources. And, I wanted to get to know the players better. I never wanted to teach them. I never wanted to be necessarily involved with the instruction part of things. So I always tried to keep that kind of separate and worked a little bit on some player development stuff kind of early on. But I did. And it's funny. I think I sometimes continue to get surprised when I do these initial consults, how much, even though this wealth of information is out there, I do a lot to try to share content. There's several other people who started similar businesses. There was only a few of us when I started mine. There was about 4 or 5 other guys. Now there is a lot more, which is awesome. It only makes it more of a common thing, and a lot of us know each other well. So you've got a lot more help out there in content, but you still see how much these families just don't know where to begin and what to do. And some are using it for the connections and they know how much this world does work on who and that kind of stuff. But just the the misunderstanding and the miseducation that some of them have been given, and they just don't even know where to start and what to do. So you definitely see that need as much as the internet, and there's so much information. It's still so hard to filter through what's needed for you specifically. It's so different for everybody. And then some just don't even know to go seek it and look for it. So they just kind of go straight to a source and start there. And so, yeah, I mean, it's only continued to be needed and grown since I started doing this for sure.
Absolutely. And I feel like there is at least for me growing up and like getting into my college journey, I did feel like there was a massive transactional feel to it. Where, you could pay these big recruiting companies, like NCSR tried to recruit me at like one point, Silk, all of these different types of very transactional based. And it's kind of, you get slapped with a generic profile, you get slapped on the internet, they'll send out mass emails to coaches for you, but it's, it doesn't feel genuine to me. Yeah. It just feels like a means to an end. It's, for me, I took it upon myself to do the personal route, and I went and contacted a whole bunch of coaches myself. And, I feel like we all get kind of lost at the start. I didn't know what to do. I mean, my entire recruiting theory was I'm going to email every D1 coach in California and see what happens. And that's exactly what I did. I drew up a golf resume. I sent off my academics, was like, hey, I'm playing in these tournaments. Where for you as a master recruiter, where do you start these kids who might have no idea what they're doing? Where do you start?
Well, and I do want to, what you said about kind of the recruiting companies, make sure that, they definitely have a huge advantage in a lot of cases, especially certain sports. So not to knock on them by any means, because the company I worked for was great, but exactly a lot of what you said. And it does kind of tie into where I start with players and what my job and role is to help them do it themselves. And ultimately, I'm very transparent initially that I am not here to actually make it really easier for you, to be honest. I'm kind of here to make it tougher for you, because you've got to put the work in. You can't send these half-written emails out. You can't have a resume that's half done. You can't expect coaches just to come to you. And, some are lucky and play well enough, and they do get the coaches coming to them. But even within that, I just had a call with a player who had that happen. Pretty good player, and she had coaches reach out to her back on June 15th, and she knew nothing to do. They called her, set up calls. She didn't have anything together. She didn't know what questions to ask. She didn't know that she needed to continue following up with them. And so she's lost all that interest in them. And it was some big D1 programs initially, and she just didn't even know and wasn't expecting it. So that is, everybody does start at kind of different points. And even like freshmen and sophomores, I get a lot of them coming to me. The process has changed. This new June 15th date, we've definitely seen how much it's changed the process compared to 2021 and all the earlier years before that really kind of kicked in. So you're really seeing a little bit more of a true start to the process. But a lot of freshmen and sophomores, if they're on a path to be a higher level D1 player, they need to be actively doing stuff. And then you get a lot that really not until later on do they really even decide they want to play college golf, or are their scores and resume good enough to start doing anything without it being a little bit of a waste of time. So a lot of times it's really kind of depending on where they're at grad year wise and where their resume matches up to that as to when we start. And then it is, initially just starting with, if they don't have a resume together, getting it together. If they do have one, making sure it's what the coaches need to see and it represents them well, and starting with intro emails and doing the research and making things very specific and individual to the coaches they're reaching out to. And then kind of going from there in terms of the communication and updates and prepping for phone calls and all that kind of stuff. There's just so much of it is what I love about it. And I definitely didn't buy into this initially, but it's something I have learned to really try to grow within what I do, is the professional skills that you learn from this and the things that come out of learning how to do this stuff right, and learning how to even just correct your own emails, or again, just learn to prepare for a phone call and starting to just create a little bit of that, because that's only going to help them better when they go to college golf. If you're doing this for them and they don't have any accountability for it, then they're going to struggle when they get to college golf and can't do these things on their own then. So that is, again, a big part of what I try to do with them as much as possible. Sometimes the expectations and, when you are being paid to do something from a service perspective, you have to kind of mold a little bit around that, but I try to be very transparent initially on what my role is, which is to just be the kind of behind the scenes kind of person, and everything really be the player doing as much as possible.
Right. Definitely. I feel like these connections that we make as players and as recruiters can stick with us for, like a long time. I still have weekly phone calls with my old assistant coach who will call me, and like we'll talk about opening like a sake business, like we'll talk about what's going on in the golf world, like we'll talk about his new team and how the dynamics are. I feel like these connections last a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
I want to gear towards your LPGA career, because obviously you are our first pro on the show. You have a runner-up finish in the U.S. Am. You've played in 2 U.S. Women's Opens. You talked a little bit about how being an introvert actually hurt your LPGA career. Could you
Mm-hmm.
inform us as to why that
Sure.
was? Like, are most of them kind of just extroverts, happy-go-lucky, or?
No, and for me, part of it's, and a lot of people probably wouldn't believe that I'm probably half introvert, half extrovert. I'm a very weird mix of stuff. And honestly, if you knew me at different phases of my life, you probably saw me for different pieces of that. For me, it was as much just my anxiety for stuff. It's something I did not realize I had that bad when I was playing. And just never being like, my parents were awesome, super supportive, were always there, couldn't have asked for a better set of parents to go through this. But I didn't. That's why I love what I do. I didn't have somebody that did kind of push me to try to do things better. I just happened to be pretty good at the game of golf, and I played volleyball, played basketball, and everything kind of came easy in that sense. And I just never developed that structure and work ethic and that ability to, from one stage to another, realize that, I had to do better with things, and I had to learn more maturity with things, both on and off the golf course. And some of that is just learning how to speak for yourself and how to talk and answer questions and be comfortable doing those things. And, we'd have these pro-am parties we'd have to go to. And I mean, that kind of stuff just gave me just nightmares for having to do that, especially if I had to go into them by myself. I just didn't all that stuff. So everything was just always this like anxious ball of just nerves with everything that I did. And, that's just where, what I love about getting to do this and being able to try at a little bit earlier age to get these girls to be a little bit more comfortable with some of that, because it is such a bigger long-term thing, even if they don't plan on playing professional golf. But for me, I mean, if I had a great college coach as well. We talk about it, I think he probably could have pushed me to even do more than what I should have. But it was kind of a weird situation. He was like, you're just good at what you did, and kind of just let me do my own thing. And I probably would have rebelled at that point had he tried a different way, though. Now I look back and I'm like, I wish he would have just like set me down and said, no, Brandi, we're going to do it this way. But I probably, and I think he kind of knew that too. So you can only say that to a certain degree. But that, I mean, and I think out there you get a big mix, and probably a lot are probably more introverted than extroverted, but you just learn how to be more comfortable in those settings. And I never worked with a mental coach. I had a great one that wanted to work with me early on. I just didn't use my resources. I didn't take things serious enough and really see that I couldn't just do it on my own. It wasn't as selfish. I thought I was that good. I just was scared to do those things, scared to ask for help and, add more expectation and that kind of stuff. So yes, where you do get a lot to have the mental side of things, working on stuff just to help you get a little bit tougher and just learn to be a little bit more mature and handle those things better. And I just definitely didn't have that, and can't blame anybody but myself. Some of those opportunities were there. I just didn't take advantage of them.
That is a fascinating insight, and it's very unique. I don't think I've met I mean, anybody who's had a 7-year LPGA career, arguably very successful in their own right, still say, hey, look, I really wish, I did things different. You were like a multiple-time All-American, like back at Furman. And it's super fascinating because I feel like that mental side definitely is that next step. And, like we talked with Rick Sessinghouse last week, who was Colin Morikawa's like mental coach. I felt myself learning way too much than what I felt like I should have been. And I've definitely started to take some of it into the future. So obviously over that LPGA career, did you feel like you almost crafted a persona to match that media, like that media expectation? Or because obviously, you are doing a lot of media, like interviews, and you're obviously in front of a camera a lot, you're on TV, it's this big expectation. Did you feel like you almost lost a little bit of yourself trying to turn into somebody that the tour wanted you to be?
There is a little bit of a struggle, especially then. It's been almost 20 years ago since I first turned pro and started that. The tour itself has changed. It was when you had the Natalie Galbis era with her doing a lot of stuff. I actually was an Adidas sponsored athlete at that time and was on the lower totem pole of it for sure, but was TaylorMade Adidas. And so saw a lot of what she did. So there was a lot of that you do. It's a weird identity kind of thing because, you're in a lot of ways you are, still trying to kind of figure out where you fit and who you are. You've kind of gone through college and got that, but you were still on a team. So you kind of go from junior golf to then kind of college golf being a team. And then you're back to just being kind of out there by yourself again to figure stuff out. And trying to figure out kind of how you fit in with that. And I think if I had been full LPGA status a little bit more consistently, but especially when you're going back and forth, that's what's hard, because I got full LPGA status coming right out of college, went straight out as a rookie. My first year out on tour, I played a few Futures Tour events and played the U.S. Open as an amateur that year, and then went to Q school, got full status. And so, going out as somebody who already kind of felt way behind in terms of, like I said, just maturity, it was. And then you go right back to, if you don't play well enough, you hate to say you're a nobody, but you're right back to just, where everybody else started from, back on, the Futures Tour, playing again, working your way up. And luckily, after a couple of years, had some good seasons out there and finished top 10 on the money list 2 years. And then you're back to the LPGA Tour again. And so that was very tough. That back and forth, trying to figure out, where you fit in and, how can you make, something of yourself, both on and off the golf course was tough. As opposed to, the ones when you can consistently stay out there, you start to kind of develop that a little bit easier. When you're going back and forth and your confidence is shot and you kind of feel like you're on a high and you're just right back down to the bottom of the totem pole, it's a tough thing to kind of battle with that. And yeah, the media piece, again, back then we didn't have social media. We didn't have all that stuff. So I think you didn't have to feel as forced to do some of those things. So then when it did happen, it was kind of a little bit of a shock of like, oh my gosh, I got to sit on this camera. And then everybody at home sees it. And I remember going through the USAM, they made fun of my accent on TV. I made fun of it, but they gave me a hard time about my accent and how I said stuff. And that week was such a blur. You just didn't realize what was going on until after the fact. But when people were seeing it, and that was a time when unless something like that happened, you didn't see people for what they were going on, in their daily life. Now you see it with social media. So I think people are a little bit more comfortable with being on TV and on camera and doing all that than we were back then, where when those things came up, you just, they stick a camera in your face, or you're walking down the fairway with this camera, like following you, and you're trying to act normal, but you're also, it's just like, do I say something funny or do I just kind of keep walking? That stuff was always like super awkward.
That is I feel like I would always be super awkward. I would definitely say something so I would absolutely regret. I feel like, oh, well, actually, here's what I ate for breakfast today. And,
that was one of the funniest moments with the USAM we ended up going to a playoff, and it was the first playoff hole, and it was all this drama behind it because I was 3 down with 3 holes to go, and then we had this big rain delay, go back out, or we'd already hit our tee shots, and I think our second shot, and this was right before the storm hit, and I was walking down the fairway or something, and I think it was just a spectator. They happened to catch me on camera doing. A spectator asked what I hit, and I said a 9-iron, and it came out so country. And I think it was Judy Rankin that did it. And her and I talked about it later on. You could say, well, you can tell she's from, even though it said Belton, South Carolina, you can tell where she's from. And I was like, oh. So again, stuff like that. That once it happens, and it just kind of makes you makes me more nervous about it. But now I've just kind of, I don't know, I just learned to embrace it and do a lot of social media, do a lot of stuff, done Golf Channel episodes and stuff like that I just don't even think about it anymore now.
I didn't even know you had an accent.
It is not nearly what it used to be. It is actually much more tame than what it used to be. But I mean, South Carolina.
Well, Connor, you're always awkward too, so it's all good.
Yeah, I am though. Like, people just don't understand. They just don't get, or they don't really understand what goes on in my brain as I'm talking and doing stuff, and the things that I am thinking about, or as soon as I leave a conversation, the things that I am like, oh my gosh, should I really say that? Or it's crazy.
That's so funny.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So with your, you help your students or your clients a lot with the mental game side and some of your experiences and what you went through, or
we do a little. I mean, I certainly try to. I mean, I've got several mental coaches that I recommend girls to, especially when they're really struggling. I mean, of course, a lot of them will come to me because I am a female. I get that. I get the emotional piece of things. I get what it was like to be in that position. Hopefully in the spring, actually getting ready to add one of my former players to the business so that she, even more fresh into having been through all that, can really kind of relate to them. So more from a mentor perspective with that, and just a little bit of just giving them that feeling that, hey, I know what it's like. I was there, like, it's going to be okay. But when they really do need the ongoing help, or they need somebody that can help give them exercises and that are experts in that field, for sure. We have several players that I've referred or that are already working with somebody, but try to fill a little bit of those gaps. But I mean, I'm big on, I do what I do for a reason and do the recruiting stuff. And that's one reason why I've even gotten away from kind of the player development side of things. Yeah. Can I help with some of those? For sure. And can kind of, touch into some of that. But a lot of that, there's reasons people are good at what they do. And especially when you really need that expert help with it, versus maybe just a little, word here or there, just a conversation with me or something. Always happy to recommend, the girls go see somebody and see it on a more regular basis, or at least, something initially or something like that.
Definitely. Yeah. I have so many good stories from college. I am really curious to kind of hear your take on, obviously I don't really know where Furman is.
Furman.
I'm assuming it's Furman.
Furman. Yeah.
I don't even know what the name of the university.
Yeah. Well, and that's what's funny. Furman is a very unique setup because, I mean, it's one of the top women's golf programs in the country. I mean, it's a D1 school. It's a liberal arts school. It is a small school. It's only 25 to 2,700 students. It's here in Greenville, South Carolina. So that's one reason I was so familiar with it growing up. Dottie Pepper, Betsy King, Beth Daniels, some of your best LPGA players all went there, and they were out on tour when I was younger, and I went to a LPGA girls golf camp up there and met them. And I came home that day and said, I want to go to Furman and be a professional golfer. And I was like 8 years old at the time, maybe 9. And I mean, legit from that day on, that's all I ever said. A big Clemson fan, grew up Clemson family, still a huge Clemson Tiger fan, even after this last Saturday's embarrassing defeats. But Clemson didn't have a women's golf team. They just started it 8-10 years ago or so. So they didn't have women's golf. So it was something I kind of never really knew about anyways, being able to have an option there. But yeah, it's a really high academic school, but it is a smaller school, and on a D1 athletic side of things, it's not going to be as well known. But if within the women's golf side of things, it has been a kind of women's powerhouse of typically always being in the top 40, top 50, producing a lot of professional players back then, and then continues to do so. But yeah, outside of the women's golf world, and they've had some good soccer teams. We actually one of the best Major League Soccer players, or Clint Dempsey came out of Furman. Same time I was there, was a really good soccer player, and some others. And but on a big national scale, women's golf is kind of their biggest representation from an athletic department on a national compete against the best NCAA teams in the country. Because I mean, we went to UGA tournament and South Carolina's tournament and Tennessee's tournament. We played all the big ACC, SEC tournaments and teams, and we're competing with them and against them.
Fascinating. Yeah, that is a powerhouse program. I always feel like each school is kind of known for something that little bit different. I mean, my first school was known for nursing. There was no athletic side, and I was like, it's whatever. I get to play D1. But Chris, I kind of wanted to kick this over to you. I wanted your take on your favorite tournament round in college and what made it so memorable.
Favorite tournament round in college? Well, that's hard because I didn't play that great in college, so I don't really have one from my time at SDSU.
Or like,
maybe
or like funny
Sandpiper?
stories on the road.
Well, Sandpiper, I think, was fun. That's why we had that Sandpiper FCG tournament for so many years, because we played there in February, and the wind, it was raining, it was blowing 40 miles an hour. There was a par 3. I know I was just telling the story the other day. It's like 220 yards, elevated tee, all by the water, right by the ocean, and the wind was blowing 40 off the right. And the best tee shot in our group for both rounds that day, because it was 2 rounds in one day, was on the next hole's tee box. And we were all hitting flop shots to it. Like, it was crazy. Anyway, I think the best score I saw on that hole was double. And so that was, so then when we did start Future Champions, I knew I wanted to host a tournament there. So that's probably my best actually in college tournament story. So that's all you got.
Brandi, do you have any funny stories from like a college round? Anybody?
My probably favorite, like best memory from a positive playing kind of perspective was my senior year for NCAA for East Regionals. Actually I think I started the day with a triple and ended up shooting 66 to win regionals. And so my scorecard had a triple and still shot 66. So that was pretty cool. And that's what allowed me to go to NCAA Nationals as an individual my senior year. So to have, I think it was one of the early on, I think, when I had the triple. I might know my parents remember it better than I do. So that from a college, obviously the USAM was a huge memorable week. And again, my semifinal match, 3 down with 3 holes to go and came back to win it to make it into the finals was a pretty cool thing. Funny stuff. God, those are just endless. Always, I do my podcast episodes with the coaches and ask them some of these stories, and I'm always like, God, what would I answer to some of this stuff? Because, a lot of them definitely, and I know a lot of people say this, but definitely a lot of things I can't share. But lots of, I can't think. Oh, I do have a good funny one that I know my coach actually, I think he brought it up on the podcast. So we were at UGA's tournament, either my junior or senior year. And we had just gotten new shoes, and FootJoy had just come out with their kind of more like cushion bottom, like insoles and shoes. And I decided to wear them. I think it might've been the second day of the tournament. And I get out on the range and everything I keep hitting is thin. And I'm like, this is weird. Like, there's no way this has anything to do with my new shoes. So, I think I went ahead and changed that day and was like, just in case I could go back to my original pair. And they were these, like, they were supposed to be this like extra cushion. So I played, played pretty good or whatever. And so then the next day I was like, all right, I'm determined that this is nothing to do with the shoes. Sure enough, put them on the range. Same thing. Every single shot was just thin. And I'm like, this can't be. But we realized, we looked at the difference in the shoes. And because of the extra like cushion, I did have like an extra half an inch. And, and I still don't remember if I played during the round or what it was, and ended up playing really good. But it was something that was just crazy, and we definitely blamed it on the shoes. And I think it was a legit thing because, like I said, when you looked at them, you could tell a difference just because they had this, like, they were made to have this, like, extra soft, like, cushion in them. You don't think something little like that could change. But, when you add an extra half an inch to your height, you're not used to having to, like, get down to the golf ball that much. And the whole time I was just like, I swear this cannot be what it is. I was determined to prove it wrong. And I think maybe I learned my lesson the first day and switched back or something like that. So that was
golf really is a game of inches.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's superstition as well.
God,
whether it was
the most superstitious.
Yes. Yeah. So whether it was the extra half an inch or if it was just in my head, I still to this day, I still say it was the extra half an inch. My coach, I think, still says it was in my head, but I still swear it was the extra half an inch.
Oh man, I still remember I was in Texas in El Paso. We were playing. It was our first round. It was my first tournament in as a transfer. We were playing Whistling Dunes, I think, and we had our team of 5, and we get traveling, and our number 3 guy starts to feel a little uneasy. Kind of, hey, coach, I have an upset stomach. He's like, all right, just don't look at your phone too much in the bus. It's a 5-hour drive. Like, we get there. We play our practice round. He's getting progressively worse. Coach just tells him to kind of take it easy, get up in the morning, see how you feel. No big deal. We rock up the morning of the first round for the 36 hole day. He is vomiting uncontrollably just everywhere. He's white in the face, but he is the quintessential fighter. Yeah. He's on the range. He's hitting balls. He's ready to go. He's weaker than anything you've ever seen. He's, can hardly pick up a club. He's so stubborn. We actually get onto the course and he's still ready to play. As we're driving out in carts, he's vomiting out the side of the cart.
Goodness.
And we finally get out there and he's ashy white and coach is like, you're not playing. You're done. You're just go home. And, he actually fainted on the course. So we had to call in a helicopter before the start of the round. He got medevac to the hospital. Poor kid had appendicitis.
Oh, goodness.
Oh, no.
So,
that's crazy.
Of all the times to get appendicitis, he wound up getting it on the first round of our biggest tournament of the year, our first tournament, our number 3 guy.
Terrible.
So he's in the hospital getting operated on. We're out there trying to play around of golf and try not to laugh our guts out. And obviously, we're still worried sick about it.
Yeah.
And it was just the most wild circumstance. We still ended up coming fourth and we were playing 4 for 4 instead of playing, the typical 5 for 4. It was just one of the most ridiculous things. And he was a football player. Didn't really know what pain was. Would just play through anything because coach would tell him to. It's like, dude, it's golf. It's not football. You don't have to play. If you have appendicitis, feel free.
And you don't really get a lot of breaks.
Checked out.
Yeah, you still kind of got to you got to be able to walk from one hole to another. You don't just get to go sit on the bench after a couple of plays and just kind of show up and a little different scenario there. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. It was absolutely crazy. It was 10 hours and he was ready to grit it out. And I was like, dude, you're going to end up dying. And apparently when he got into the hospital, they were, I think the doctors were like, yeah, you were about a half hour from your appendix bursting.
Yeah.
So it was just one of those where it was just,
well, that's where it's always so crazy and not getting super serious on that note about it. But that's one thing that definitely struggle a lot with now with the injuries and the withdrawals and everybody being sick and stuff. Of just where that boundary is between, pushing through. I mean, I was sick once in college, really only throughout my entire junior college professional career. I think I had one time that I was so sick, and it was actually a very similar thing. I threw up all night long and was in the ER, the local whatever, the next morning, having IVs pumped in me because I had been so sick and couldn't play the first 2 days. And that was probably the only time I ever missed a golf tournament for injury, sickness, anything in 15-year, 20-year career or whatever. And you see so much of it now, and there's a lot of legit reasons behind it. Overuse, these injuries, hitting off mats and, higher swing speeds without the ability to kind of to have the strength to withstand all these different reasons or whatever. But it is just so hard. You see it so much more, and you want to feel for the players because again, if he had not gotten in time, it could have been a big issue. But then it's also like, well, where is that line between just tough it up, tough it out and keep going? It's such a different world when it comes to that now, and it's just hard to find that in between of true injuries and sickness and all of those things. It's been an interesting concept to kind of analyze from an outside perspective when that happens now,
especially with like you talk about, you have an obligation to your school because obviously you've been put on scholarship, you're playing for your school, it's a big deal. For me, I still remember my freshman debut. We got new shoes and coach wouldn't let us wear the shoes until we played in a tournament.
Yeah.
And I didn't qualify for any of the tournaments during the fall, won our spring qualifier for first out, but I hadn't worn the shoes. Everybody else had. And it was one of those where I walked off the course. We played the Farms here in San Diego. It's 7,000 yards. It's hilly. I walked off the course and I had just blister sacks, just the size of golf balls on both my feet, under my toes. It was not fun. And I told coach, I was like, I need to go see somebody because I'm not prepared to walk another 18 holes. But it's, where do we draw the line between our own personal health and, our obligation to this school that has invested, frankly, a lot of money in us?
Yeah.
And if we're going to, all of a sudden wimp out, I mean, I know a lot of coaches, like Chris and I have talked about this where, say you quit and walk off in the middle of a golf round, it's like, you're just not going to play again.
Yeah.
And it's balancing this pressure of, what am I allowed to do? Where can I draw the line? If that might end up being a problem, like some point down the road where it's like, I might have to put my personal interest above that of the team, but that might end up costing me my spot. It's tough to draw that line. I'm curious to actually get your take, Brandi, on, you've had an extensive career both in college, junior, and like professional. And you spoke a little bit about that, the individual to team, back to individual. Golf really is this weird in between sports of this individual into team, like in the individual. How do you prep players to kind of prepare for that?
Yeah, so we talk a lot about that, and I get asked quite a bit. I do a spring series with all of my seniors to just try to help them prepare a little bit for that transition and kind of understand. I think the girls' side is definitely much different than the boys' side when you get to college and how that team atmosphere is. And there's certain things that you can't prepare for. A lot of the college coaches will kind of tell you that too, that like, it's going to be hard. It's going to be tough. Like, you don't know what you're walking into from, even if you've been on your visit, you met some of the girls, you still just don't quite know. But it's just even the kind of that putting your personal health or your personal preferences, ahead of what the team may want to do, even when it comes down to like where you eat. I had one girl that was on a team and they would eat a lot of fast food and she couldn't have, certain things. And she, where all that it's such a weird thing, both from kind of a personality perspective. I mean, you have a surprising amount of kind of mean girl mentality on teams and a lot of drama and a lot of, because you're not too many sports are you competing against each other within the team. I mean, you may have your backup quarterback obviously wants to beat you so that they can beat the starting quarterback. But outside of that, there's really no competition as much on most other teams where your goal is to work together to be a team. With golf, it is such a competitiveness among each other to just earn the spot on the team to go to the tournaments. And even when you're in tournaments, there's still an individual component to, you may go into a playoff against your own teammate for the win if you both play really good. So it's a very weird mind kind of game and a hard adjustment to go from junior golf into college and want to do what's best for you. And you kind of feel like what's good for you, and both adapting to the coaches' changes of things, as well as the team. And it's hard. I mean, it's definitely a very tough transition. I mean, any high school to college sport is tough, but you've already kind of had that environment a little bit at a high school level going into college. And it's just a whole new experience. And I know the guys struggle with it. The girls really struggle with it hard. I get a lot of freshmen coming in fall semester and the things they come back with and how hard it's been. I feel for them. And I know it was tough for me. I mean, we had quite the diverse team and mix of personalities and totally different approaches to the game of golf and work and study. And it's hard not to be frustrated with other people, and it's tough. So we, definitely try to at least just understand that it's going to be hard. I really don't know that there is a way to, outside of playing another sport fairly competitively and learning what it was like to be on a true team up to a point of through high school, if at all possible. I do see those girls maybe manage it a little bit better who have played another sport pretty consistently. But otherwise, I mean, there's only so much you can do to prepare for it, just because, it's just how it's going to be. And then it's very specific to the girls you end up with on the team and the coach. And obviously my job with what I do is try to help get as good of a fit as possible. But even that's hard. I mean, you get a very short little snippet of what it's going to be like. And that even changes before you get there a lot of times. So it is, it's a weird mind boggling kind of transition that there's only so much you can do to prepare. And I think the biggest thing I think is just, as much as I don't like to put this cloud over college golf by any means and put a big damper on it, is getting them to understand. I had somebody that, asked, well, is this how it's going to be? We deal with this on the high school team and we're dealing with this girl here, it can't be like that in college golf. And I'm like, oh, you just wait and see. Like, you just don't even know. And again, it's not to put a damper on it, but it's just to say, like, you get parents involved in college golf just as much. You get mean girl mentality. You get cattiness. You get the drama. Oh, it's still just as much, it's just, and a lot of college coaches right now feel like they're limited on what they can regulate because, if they get somebody on the team that's causing an issue, but that, sometimes that those parents go to the administration. And so coaches are on a thin line for how much they get to, some of the parents are like, why can't the coach just kind of nip it in the bud? And I'm like, it's not as easy as that, because a lot of times they've got a lot of red tape to have to, to keep up, to not be able to do it. And sometimes have to allow certain things to kind of play out certain ways, just to keep their jobs. And it's tough for sure. A lot of coaches talk about that now and how hard that is for them.
Hey, Brandi, do you
truly,
Brandi, do you see a lot of players transfer?
It's definitely gotten more and more frequent because the process is a little bit easier. And I think these last couple of years you did, just because a lot of decisions during COVID were made without the normal, typical process. So, you had a lot of girls and guys who made decisions without even getting to go to campus and do anything. So you had that. So, you could see a little bit of understanding even within on both sides of things. It's like, hey, we really didn't have any way to know this because of COVID stuff. The transfer portal does. And I think there are a lot of legit reasons, to do it and see it happen. And then a lot of it is, the wrong reasons for it. It definitely makes coaches, really kind of have to think about why is somebody in the transfer portal. But it's just, as much as a coach doesn't want somebody maybe to leave the team, then they also need the transfer portal when they need somebody. So it's kind of a love-hate relationship with the transfer portal, because you hate that it's kind of easy in some ways because it allows somebody on your team to just kind of dip out when it gets tough. But then when you do need somebody, it makes it a little easier for you just to kind of hop into the portal, do a little bit of searching and contact some players to find somebody to replace them.
Yeah, I'm actually currently still in the transfer portal. It's my second time in the transfer portal. But kind of the same thing. It's like my first time was COVID, and I'm a chemical engineer by trade. And so I kind of needed to find a school that could take it. And then now the reason is my head coach got fired and my assistant coach left. So it was like, I kind of lost all reason to stay at that school. And it wasn't anything, half our team ended up either quitting or transferring. And it was just one of those weird things that, again, it is very difficult to discern why somebody might be in the portal, without asking all the right questions.
Yeah.
And it is, I got a lot of stigma the first time I went in the portal, but, my head coach actually recommended it. He's like, hey, look, you're an engineer. If you can find a school that's better for you, then do it. I'm not going to hold you back. And, you can still play. I think a lot of people don't realize, though, is that when you are in the portal, under normal circumstances, you are completely cut off from the team. It is like a one and done. You do not work out with the team anymore. You don't practice with the team anymore. You go to class until you find a school, and then you're out. It is if you put in it's a very serious, I know we're talking about it very lightheartedly, but it is a monumental decision that, you have to come to after a lot of thought of, is this school not the right fit? Am I ready to give up? And some people don't find another home. Some people, if they're struggling in college golf and don't get out of the transfer portal, they're just going to have to drop out of college athletics altogether. So these are all things to consider. I've been very lucky. I've found, another school, and I'm talking to a couple for, the future. And it's hard when, you might just have to give up collegiate sports altogether. So it's a big decision. And I think that comes down to finding the right fit coming into college the first time around.
Yeah. It definitely is. I had one that almost happened to, and she ended up missing a semester by just not being able to figure it out in time. It was a tough situation. But I kind of walked through that with them to understand that, the logistics of the process transferring is a much easier, but the decision, the timing, the repercussions and all that is still what it is. Because, when do you decide to tell your coach? Because the earlier you do it, the more time you have to figure it out. But yet, like you said, you get cut off from stuff. So there's a lot to consider. And you don't know what's out there until you do it. And if you're on pretty good scholarship money, and scholarship's a big thing, you throw yourself out there and you may not be able to find somewhere that has enough scholarship money to take you that matches up to everything that you need. And it's tough. I've gone through it as much as every time I take on kind of a transfer situation, I'm not going to do this again, because it's some of my most stressful things. But, there's justified reasons for it. There's truly help that's needed when it comes down to it. And I had one that was really a tough situation. And so it's hard to, it's a very, very tough time. Again, like I said, sometimes it's understood and you just need to go somewhere else for reasons, but it still doesn't make it easy.
Right. All right. Well, I think that's all the time we have for today. Brandi, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Welcome.
Please check her out, Brandi Jackson Golf. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on, and it's been great talking to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
All righty, guys. Until next time.